If you're a vegetable grower, then there's one plant that you'll definitely want to grow, and that's tomatoes. There's no other plant that puts out the smell of summer any better. In today's episode, I'm going to give you 12 tomato tips to become a better gardener. And if you follow this video right through, you'll be harvesting tomatoes better than you've ever tasted before. Make sure you stay right to the end because I've got a bonus tip for you too. I'm Tony O'Neill and this is UK Here We Grow, and on this channel we deal with all things gardening, poultry keeping and beekeeping. If you want that perfect garden to relax in or just want to grow your own nutrient dense foods, then start now by clicking the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified each time I release new content just like this. You know, there's nothing better than walking into a polytunnel or a greenhouse in late spring or early summer and getting hit with that scent of tomatoes. If you've grown tomatoes before, you'll know exactly what I mean. But for me, it's a really exciting time because you know it's not long before you start harvesting those juicy little fruits. These are flavours that you just can't buy in the shops, and for me, it's what gardening is all about. It's total perfection. So let's take a look at these 12 tips. Tip number 1. When you're sowing your tomato seeds, whether that be a tray or into individual cells, you want to allow the roots room to grow. If you are sowing into a tray, as soon as the tomato has its first set of true leaves, you want to be potting this on because you really want that plant to have as least root disturbance as possible. But once you're potting them on, each time you see roots coming out of the bottom of that pot, it's time to put into a bigger pot and keep doing this until it goes into the final planting place. It's really important to give the roots room to spread out. You don't want them being all cramped in one position because if they do that, they'll never start spreading out when you put them in the final place. Tip number 2. When you're growing your tomato seedlings, usually light levels are really low at that time of year. So it's really important to be able to give your plants as much light, and sometimes even a windowsill isn't enough. So artificial lights may need to be used for around 12 to 14 hours a day. Now, it's important if you do use artificial lights to keep the lights right above, a couple of inches above the plants, and move the lights as the plant grows. And if for any reason the tomatoes get leggy because there wasn't enough light, you can plant them deeper when it comes to potting on time, and this will allow you to get rid of the legginess of the plant where it's stretched looking for light, and will allow you to sink it deeper. And the great thing about tomatoes is they will root from the stem, so you're actually getting a stronger root system. Tip number 3. We've worked really hard now to get good strong plants, and it's really important if you want quality plants at the end to start with quality plants in the beginning. Now, as your seedlings grow and the weather is nice outside, maybe you want to open a window or put on an electric fan to make the tomatoes sway from back to forth, because what this does is allows the plant to resist that swaying movement, which strengthens the plant's stem structure, and this will give you a stronger, healthier plant. If you don't have access to a window for a cross breeze or a fan, then you can just rub your hands over the tops of the tomatoes like I'm doing here, and that will have the same benefit. Tip number 4. If your soil's not very good, then you can remove some of this soil and use it elsewhere in the garden. Once you've done this, you have an opportunity to soak your beds to rehydrate them, so to speak. The biggest issue with growing in greenhouses and tunnels is that if you don't water through the winter, all the soil life dries off. By watering the remaining soil, you're bringing moisture back. Then it's a perfect time to replace the removed soil with some organic matter such as compost or manure. Dig this into the soil and soak the bed for a second time. The soil life will move back into the bed very quickly as you've just inoculated it with the manure or the compost. Tip number 5. Tomato plants are climbing vines and they grow very tall and very fast, and it's up to the gardener to be able to provide some sort of support structure for this. Now, a lot of people will tie strings to the crop bars in their polytunnel or their greenhouse, and they will drag the string right down and put it underneath the root ball of the tomato when they're planting it. And then as the tomato grows, they will wrap the tomato plant around the string. I personally don't like this. I've seen that the tomatoes cut into the string as the weight is pulling down on them. So I like to use canes, and I support my canes with a 2x1 running across the top of the rafters of the polytunnel. I drill a hole into that where a cane slots up through and down into the ground, and then I tie my tomatoes against that cane with a cable tie machine, and these are fantastic machines. They really speed the process of tying in up really quickly. That's how I support mine, but however you decide to support yours, you'll need to get that structure in place before the tomatoes start to grow properly, because once their root system's out, if you start jabbing canes in, you're going to do some damage. Tip number 6, tomatoes love heat. Now, before you plant your tomatoes, it's a real good idea to warm up the soil that your tomatoes are going to be planted in. Now, a couple of weeks before planting your tomatoes into that bed, if you put some black plastic down on the bed, it will help warm it up by catching the sun's rays and holding them in the soil. And this can also help when you come to planting time, because it will stop planting shock, so the tomatoes will thrive straight away rather than being knocked back. Tip number 7, when it comes time to planting, dig your hole nice and deep. If you're an organic gardener, then you can add things like fish heads or fish bodies into the hole, along with some eggshells for calcium. This will provide loads of nutrients later on as it decomposes. The other thing you want to do then is add some soil over the top of that. Add a little bit of blood fish and bone, or blood meal or bone meal if you're in the States, and then plant your tomato. Now, it's important to plant your tomato much deeper, right up to the first set of true leaves. When you're planting your tomato, put it down nice and deep and backfill it. But now's a good time to also add mycorrhizal fungi. Now, I'll speak more about this in a later episode, but this will help the root mass for the plant to take up more nutrients. Tip number 8, tomatoes become massive plants, and because of this, they need huge amounts of water. They're also putting out a lot of work into these fruits, and they need the moisture to do that. Now, a lot of people will water their tomato plants with a watering can, or they may even set up a drip irrigation system. I'm not doing any of those here this year. What I am doing though is I am sinking a 2-litre pop bottle along the side of each plant. Now, I will drill holes in this 2-litre pop bottle, but they will only be on the one side facing the plant, which means all the water has to go towards the plant. Now, this has multiple benefits. Firstly, it makes the tomato's roots go down further looking for this water, which makes the plant stronger and able to support heavier loads. But also, what it does, it keeps the surface of the soil nice and dry. It produces less evaporation because of that, but also because of the less evaporation, there's less chance of catching blight in your greenhouse or polytunnel. And keeping that surface dry is paramount if you want to avoid the blight. Tip number 9. A few other things to note are that now is a good chance, once you've planted your tomatoes, to add a mulch. Something like straw or hemp or even wool will work really well here. And what this does, it stops water from bouncing back up if you are top watering onto the leaves, which will help with soil-borne diseases such as blight. But another great tip here is having good cross ventilation. As you can see right the way down this tunnel, we have windows that we can put in and out, and at the moment they're all out because it's really warm today. But what this does, it brings a good cross blow of wind through the tunnel, and that will also help with things like keeping the tomatoes dry and ensuring blight can't take hold. Tip number 10. It's really important to remove the suckers on your tomato plants. And there's a couple of reasons for this, and the first of those is that those suckers sap energy from the main plant, which is taken away from fruit production. They also don't bear any fruit, so there's no point having them anyway. So it's really important to remove those suckers. However, pruning tomatoes should be done with care. Apart from taking the suckers, you don't need to prune until the plant has filled its allotted space. Now in my tunnel we have about 6.5–7 feet of headroom so that we can let it go up 6 or 7 trusses, at which point we will prune the tip of the plant out to stop it growing any taller. And also, when it comes to pruning, later on in the year when we want to allow airflow and light to get into the fruits, we can start pruning the leaves off the plant up to the bottom truss that has fruit. As we remove that fruit, we can take the leaves higher again. So what that does, it allows airflow around the plant, but it also allows light to get into the fruits to help ripen them. This next tip is one that you all need to listen to. When watering tomatoes, water them deeply. Don't come here daily watering them. You really need to give them a good soaking. That's why the 2-litre pop bottle thing is a really good thing, because it gets the water right down to the roots. You don't want to ever let this soil completely dry out. Irregular watering is the #1 cause of blossom end rot in tomatoes. We've spoken about it before when we did the calcium video, and I'll put a link in the description for that. But if you're allowing it to dry out, it's no good coming here and going on holidays for a week and having no one come in and water it. So when you do water, you water a lot, water deeply. You're much better off doing that twice a week than coming here every single day and just giving it a little sprinkle. Keep the soil moist and you will ensure that none of the fibrous root system dies off, and also it will keep any of the mycorrhizal bacteria that's grown in here that we put in when we planted. It'll keep that alive as well, because without that, that will die as well. Tip number 12, at the end of the season, when it comes to your fruit, then you want to lay off the watering a little bit. Don't do it so much that the plant becomes stressed, but by slackening off on the watering, it will get the plant to condense its sugars, which will make your fruit taste so much better. You really need to sort of judge this right. You don't want to stress the plant too much where it decides to drop its flowers, or at worst case scenario, its fruit. Here's the bonus tip for you. When it comes to ripening tomatoes, we are at the mercy of the weather. Now, there are a few things you can do to ensure and help the plant to ripen these fruits, and the first of them is to remove all of the leaves right the way up to the bottom truss of tomatoes. We've already spoken about that. The next thing is you can bring some of the leaves back on the stems, so anything above the top, cut them back to just a couple of leaves. You just want to leave enough for the plant to continue photosynthesis, but allow that light to get in there. And another thing that you want to do at this time of year, the plant will continue to try and put out blooms, and they are no use to you because they will never produce a tomato that you're able to ripen and eat, because we're now coming to the end of summer. So if any more blooms come through, cut those off as well, and you will find that you'll be able to ripen all of your tomatoes on the vine itself. Question of the day: what varieties of tomatoes are you growing? And I'd be especially interested to know if they are rare varieties. Let me know in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you got value from this video, you can subscribe here. And when you've done that, you can continue the journey by viewing one of these videos right here. I'm Tony O'Neill, this is UK Here We Grow, and remember folks, you reap what you sow. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.